So here I am. I never thought I'd be writing a post like this, but I guess that's life. Huh? You think everything's fine, maybe even great, and then out of nowhere, the rug gets pulled out from under you. Let me start by saying I loved my wife. Emily was my world. We've been married for 12 years, and I thought we had a good life together. Not perfect, but whose is? We have 2 amazing kids, a decent house in the suburbs, and up until recently, I thought we were just your average family. If I'm being honest, I was content. My life revolved around work, the kids, and spending time with Emily when we could squeeze it in between all the craziness of family life. She was busy too. Her job had been more demanding over the last year, but that didn't raise any red flags for me. She'd always been driven, ambitious. In fact, I admired that about her. She took pride in her work. Sometimes she'd complain about her boss, Michael, but I figured that's what people do. Vent about work stress. Things started to change about 6 months ago. It was subtle at first. Emily would get home later and later from work, with reasons that sounded perfectly normal. Deadlines, client meetings, corporate dinners. I didn't think anything of it because, well, I trusted her. I never had a reason not to. We were a team. I was always the one reassuring her that it was okay to focus on her career, that I'd handle the kids if she needed extra time. I thought I was being supportive. But then, there were small moments that began to feel off. Emily started dressing up more for work. She's always been well put together. But suddenly, she was buying new outfits, putting on more makeup, and doing her hair in ways I hadn't seen before. When I teased her about it, she'd just laugh and say it was to stay professional. I brushed it off. Why would I suspect anything? She's my wife, the mother of my kids. Looking back, I feel so naive. The late nights continued. She'd come home exhausted, barely having time for the kids or me. It wasn't just the physical absence, though, that I could understand. It was more like she wasn't there when she was around. She'd be on her phone constantly, checking messages during dinner, giggling at texts that she never shared with me. I noticed her taking calls in another room, sometimes for a long time. When I asked her about it, she'd tell me it was just work stuff or a chat with a friend. I still didn't suspect anything, but I started to feel disconnected. It's hard to explain, but it was like a small gap had opened up between us, and no matter how much I tried to close it, she always seemed a step ahead, pulling further away. We'd been through tough patches before, so I thought this was just another one of those times. I told myself it was the stress of work, of raising kids, of life. Then there was the work party. Emily had told me about it a few days in advance. It was supposed to be a casual gathering at her boss Michael's house, with the team and a few clients. She seemed excited about it, more than I'd expect her to be for just another corporate event. She spent extra time getting ready that night, more than usual. I remember telling her she looked amazing, and she smiled at me, but it wasn't the kind of smile I was used to. It felt distant, like she was somewhere else entirely. That night, she came home late, really late. I had stayed up, waiting for her, but by the time she finally walked through the door, it was almost 2 a.m. She looked a little disheveled, like she'd had too much to drink, and she smelled of perfume and wine. I asked her how the party was, and she just waved it off, saying it had been fine, that she'd lost track of time. I let it go because, well, she was my wife. What was I supposed to do? Accuse her of something? At the time, the thought never crossed my mind. I went to bed that night feeling uneasy, but still didn't suspect anything more than maybe a rough night of partying. I didn't realize that this was the moment everything began to unravel. In the weeks following that party, things got even stranger. Emily's mood shifted. She was either hyper-focused on work or completely distant at home. She started making excuses not to spend time with me, saying she was too tired, too stressed, or just needed space. We hadn't been intimate in a while, but I figured that was normal with everything going on. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. There was a moment that stands out. One evening, we were sitting in the living room, and I noticed she was texting someone. I casually asked who it was. Her reaction was way more defensive than it needed to be. She quickly put her phone down and said, Just work stuff. Don't worry about it. Her tone was sharp, unlike the way we usually talk to each other. I felt a pang of suspicion for the first time. I didn't say anything, but it gnawed at me. From then on, I started paying more attention. I noticed how she would smile at her phone, how she'd leave the room to take certain calls. I even caught her whispering into the phone late at night when she thought I was asleep. When I asked her about it, she'd brush me off, saying I was being paranoid. She was so convincing, I almost believed her. Almost. Then one day, I caught a glimpse of her phone screen while she was texting. There was a name that made my heart stop. Michael, her boss. I felt a rush of heat and nausea all at once. But again, I told myself it's probably just work stuff. It had to be, right? She couldn't be cheating. Not Emily. But that seed of doubt had already been planted. And once it's there, it grows. I remember the exact moment everything came crashing down. It was a Saturday morning, and Emily was out running errands. The kids were playing in the backyard, and I was cleaning up the kitchen. Her phone was sitting on the counter, buzzing every few minutes. Normally, she'd never leave it unattended, but she must have been in a rush. I tried to ignore it, but the curiosity was too much. I knew her password, even though she'd recently changed it. I didn't want to invade her privacy, but I couldn't help myself. I unlocked the phone and opened her messages. What I saw made my heart drop into my stomach. There were hundreds of texts between her and Michael, but these weren't work-related messages. They were flirty, intimate, with inside jokes and little nicknames. They talked about how they missed each other, how they couldn't wait to see each other again. I scrolled further back and found even worse. Explicit conversations about meeting up, about things they'd done together, things I can't even bring myself to repeat. I stood there in my own kitchen, completely frozen. My legs felt weak, and I had to sit down. This couldn't be real. This was my wife, the woman I had built a life with, talking to her boss like this. I kept scrolling, hoping it was some sort of mistake. But it wasn't. It just got worse. She had been seeing him for months, since before that work party. Suddenly, everything made sense. The late nights, the secretive texts, the distance between us. She had been cheating on me this entire time, and I had been too blind to see it. When Emily got home later that day, I was still in shock. I didn't say anything right away. I didn't know how to. What do you even say to someone after discovering something like that? My mind was racing, but I knew I couldn't hold it in for long. That night, after the kids were in bed, I sat her down in the living room. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I could barely keep my voice steady. Emily, we need to talk. She looked at me, a little surprised but not alarmed. What is it? She asked, sitting down across from me. I didn't waste time. I pulled out her phone from my pocket, opened the messages between her and Michael, and handed it to her. What the hell is this? Her face went pale. She didn't even try to deny it. She just stared at the phone, her eyes wide, her mouth slightly open. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. The silence was suffocating. Finally, she looked up at me, and what she said next made me furious. It's not what you think. Couldn't believe it. Not what I think. Emily, I've seen the messages. I know what's going on between you and Michael. How long has this been happening? She started stammering, trying to explain. It just happened. Okay? I didn't plan it. It was a mistake. I felt like my head was going to explode. A mistake? This isn't just a one-time thing. You've been lying to me for months, sneaking around behind my back, while I've been here with our kids, thinking everything was fine. She started crying, but it didn't feel real. It felt like an act, like she was only upset because she got caught. I'm sorry, she sobbed, but there was no sincerity in her voice. I didn't mean for this to happen. I didn't say anything for a while. I just sat there, staring at her, feeling like I was looking at a stranger. The woman I had loved, trusted, and built a life with wasn't who I thought she was. After the confrontation, everything felt like it was moving in slow motion. Emily begged me to work things out, but the damage was done. I couldn't even look at her without feeling a wave of betrayal wash over me. Every moment we had shared, every memory, felt tainted now. I was angry, but more than that, I was heartbroken. The kids noticed something was wrong. I tried to keep things normal for them, but how do you hide that kind of devastation? They're young, but not stupid. I knew they could sense the tension. Emily and I stopped talking unless it was absolutely necessary, and when we did talk, it was cold and clipped. There was no warmth left, no love, just resentment. I'd lay in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering how it had all fallen apart. How had I not seen this coming? Was I really that blind? Or had I been in denial, ignoring all the signs because I didn't want to believe my wife could betray me like this? And then there was the humiliation. I had been so proud of my marriage, of the life we had built. I thought we were solid, that we had something real. But now I felt like a fool. Everyone around us, friends, family, they all thought we were the perfect couple. How was I going to explain this to them? How was I going to tell them that Emily had thrown it all away for some fling with her boss? The worst part was, I still loved her. Despite everything, there was a part of me that still wanted to believe this could be fixed. But how do you fix something that's been shattered into a million pieces? The days after the confrontation blurred together, filled with anger, sadness, and confusion. I felt like a walking shell of my former self, still trying to function at work, still trying to be present for the kids, but inside I was falling apart. I hadn't even begun to grasp the full scope of Emily's betrayal when something else hit me. Something that made everything so much worse. One night, after the kids were in bed, I sat in the living room, replaying everything over and over in my mind. That's when I remembered the texts from Emily's phone. I'd only skimmed them in the heat of the moment, so I decided to go back through them. I needed more answers. I needed to understand how this had happened, why this had happened. I still had access to her phone. Maybe I shouldn't have, but honestly, I didn't care anymore. So I went through the messages between her and Michael again, but this time, I paid closer attention to the details. And that's when I saw it, messages about me. They had been talking about me, not just in passing, but in a way that sent chills down my spine. Michael was mocking me, calling me clueless and pathetic. And the worst part, Emily was agreeing with him. They were laughing at how naive I had been, how easy it had been for her to lie to me, to sneak around. I read one message that hit me like a punch in the gut. Michael, does he still have no idea? Man, you've got him wrapped around your finger. Emily, none. He's so oblivious. He doesn't question anything. It's almost too easy. Too easy. That's what she said. My wife, the woman I had trusted with everything, thought it was too easy to deceive me. I felt a cold wave of disgust wash over me. But it didn't end there. As I read further, I discovered the real kicker. This affair wasn't some spur-of-the-moment thing. It wasn't a mistake that had just happened. It had been planned. Michael and Emily had been playing this sick, twisted game for years. They had been manipulating me, using me, and I had been completely in the dark. The texts went back further than I expected, years, actually. This wasn't just a recent affair. It had been going on for a long time, and it wasn't just about physical attraction or an emotional affair. No, this was something far more calculated, far more sinister. Emily and Michael had used me as a pawn in their sick game, manipulating me and playing with my life like it was some kind of sport. One message from over a year ago confirmed what I feared. Michael, you think he's ever going to catch on? Or should we keep this little game going? Emily, no way. He's too trusting. We'll keep it up until I'm ready to make a move. Until then, it's nice having him around for the stability, you know? He makes things easy. Stability? Easy? My stomach churned. I wasn't her husband in her eyes. I was just a convenient safety net, a source of stability while she played around with her boss. Every affectionate gesture, every kiss, every "I love you" was a lie, part of her twisted narrative to keep me clueless while she lived a double life. But what really sent me over the edge was their conversation about money. They were planning for the long haul, discussing how Emily could benefit financially from our marriage before she eventually left me. It wasn't just an affair. It was a calculated plot to use me, to take what I had worked for, and leave me with nothing. Michael, once he's out of the picture, we'll be set. You'll get the house, and he won't even see it coming. Emily, yeah, just a little longer. I need to figure out how to handle the divorce so I get the kids and most of the assets. He's so passive, he'll probably just roll over and let it happen. I felt a rage building inside of me that I had never felt before. They weren't just betraying me, they were trying to destroy me. Emily had turned our marriage, our family, into nothing more than a strategic plan to take everything I had. And Michael, well, he was enjoying every second of it. He saw me as a joke, someone he could toy with while building his own future with my wife. Couldn't believe it. For years, I had been a part of their dirty game. Every moment I spent trusting Emily, every moment I spent working hard to build a life for our family, was being undermined by her lies. I had been the fool, the idiot who believed his marriage was real while they laughed at me behind my back. I sat there for a long time, letting the weight of it all sink in. The betrayal, the manipulation, it was almost too much to bear. But then, something inside me shifted. I wasn't going to be their victim anymore. I wasn't going to let them win. I knew I had to act carefully. Emily and Michael had played me for a fool, but I wasn't going to let them continue. If they wanted to play games, I'd give them a taste of their own medicine. I wasn't going to blow up and confront her. Not yet. No, I had to be smarter than that. First, I made copies of everything, the texts, the emails, all the proof of their affair and their plans to ruin me. I sent it to my lawyer and asked him to prepare for a divorce. But this wouldn't be just any divorce. I was going to make sure I came out on top. Emily wouldn't see it coming. Then I started moving things around financially. Quietly, without her noticing, I began transferring money into accounts she couldn't access. I documented everything. I even had a private investigator follow her and Michael, just to make sure there was no way they could weasel their way out of what I was about to do. When Emily left for another one of her work trips with Michael, I took the kids to my sister's place for the weekend. I didn't want them around when everything hit the fan. Then, I booked a room at the same hotel where they were staying. I had no intention of confronting them in person. Not yet. I just needed to see it for myself. I needed to see how far they had taken this twisted game. That night, I watched from a distance as they met in the hotel lobby. They were all over each other, laughing and drinking, completely oblivious to the fact that their little game was about to come crashing down. I didn't confront them that night. I had already set the wheels in motion for something bigger. Emily came home from her work trip, smiling and acting like everything was fine, completely unaware that her world was about to fall apart. A few days later, I filed for divorce, and I made sure it hit her hard. With the evidence I had, Emily was left with very little. The house? Mine. The kids? With me, at least for now, while we worked out custody. And Michael? Well, let's just say his wife wasn't too thrilled when she received a package from me, detailing his affair in explicit detail. Last I heard, she was moving forward with her own divorce. Emily tried to fight back, tried to argue that I was overreacting, that it was just one mistake, but she didn't have a leg to stand on. The messages, the plans to use me, it was all laid out clearly. She didn't even have the decency to apologize properly. In the end, her lies and betrayal cost her everything. Walking away from all of this, I've learned a lot about trust, betrayal, and the importance of paying attention to the signs. I was blind for too long, and it cost me years of my life. But I'm not a victim. Not anymore. I fought back and I came out stronger. For anyone out there who thinks something is wrong in their relationship, trust your gut. Don't ignore the signs. And if you find yourself in a situation like mine, don't let it destroy you. Take control, protect yourself, and don't be afraid to fight for what's rightfully yours. That's my story. It's not what I ever imagined my life would be, but at least now, I'm free from the lies.